Further debate, the member from Windsor West.
Thank you, Speaker, and it is my pleasure to rise on behalf of my constituents of Windsor West to speak to Bill G68, the Modernizing Ontario's Municipal Legislation Act 2016. And I have a lot of notes here. I thought I knew exactly what direction I was going to go, but sitting here this afternoon and listening to some of the other members do their time in debate and some of the issues that were raised, I'm going to start in a bit of a different direction and see how far into the bill that I can get. So I wanted to start by addressing something that the member from Scarborough Agincourt said, and I have a great deal of respect for the member from Scarborough Agincourt, and she wasn't entirely, easy for me to say, inaccurate with what she had said about trustees and why they're not included in this bill. She had explained that school board trustees already have the ability to take a maternity or a parental leave. But where she didn't go with that was on to explain that under the Education Act, a trustee actually has to have permission of the entire board, the majority of the board, in order to be able to take an extended leave. So under the Education Act, they are required by law to be physically present for at least, I believe it's three meetings a year, physically present for 3 meetings a year. Anything outside of that, any extended period of time that they're going to be away, they have to have the permission of the rest of the trustees in order to do so. So it's not an automatic. Many boards, obviously, I would hope all boards, would approve a maternity or a parental leave. However, it is left up to the will and the whim of each individual school board as to whether or not they want to approve an extended leave. So this is where we start to see the difference between, and I think it's important to point out, because there are some people out there who don't know what the role of a school board trustee is. They don't understand how you become a school board trustee. Many believe that you are actually an employee of a school board, like the rest of the staff, but you are not. You run in a municipal election, your name gets put on a ballot along with the city councillors and the people running for mayor, and you are elected just like your city councillors and your mayors. So they are municipally elected officials, just like your councillors and your mayors. And because of that, they fall under legislation. They generally fall more under the Education Act than they would the Municipal Act. And we start to see, having been a trustee for 8 years and the vice chair of a school board for a year of that, it became very clear that there are some discrepancies between the expectations of our city councillors and our mayors and the expectations under law of our trustees. There are some very large gaps. So I think that, again, although the member from Scarborough Agincourt wasn't entirely incorrect, that trustees can take a leave, it is not an automatic leave. They still have to ask somebody's permission in order to take that leave. So really, they should be covered under this legislation so that they have the same rights as city councillors have. They shouldn't have to go and rely on a board of trustees. In my case, our board was 10 trustees. You shouldn't have to rely on a majority vote to say that you have the right to spend time with your child after giving birth or after adopting. It should be an automatic. You should be able to give notice saying, I've had a child or I've adopted a child and I'm going to take time off. So there's a big gap there that could have been addressed in this legislation. The other issue that came up that I found interesting was from the member from York Simcoe, someone else who I also respect greatly. And she had talked at length, and many members from the PC caucus had talked about phoning in for meetings, and she had brought up the possibility for distracted driving. Well, I'm not sure. I know I wouldn't. I'm not sure if any member in this House was calling in for whether it's a school board meeting or if they're a council would want to spend 3, 4, 5 or more hours on the phone in their vehicle, even if they're hands-free and on a Bluetooth. It's not the best way to communicate, and I don't think anybody would want to be in their car that long phoning in for a meeting, so they likely would call in their regrets for the meeting and just not participate at all. However, I'm sure that it is possible that there are some people out there who just might phone it in and spend 3 or 4 hours in their car having that conversation. Where my concern comes in around phoning in for meetings is that it appears as though the PC caucus is saying they don't support somebody being able to call in. One of the members had actually said that when he was part of City Council, his constituents expected him to always physically be present at meetings. And the reality is that is not always possible. So we have, like with school boards, where you might have members that are off at conferences, where they're learning about legislation, they're learning about things that affect their school boards and the learning experience for their students and how it affects the staff. We also have municipal councillors and mayors who go off to conferences. They meet with other councils and other mayors and discuss issues. Sometimes they have similar issues, sometimes they don't, but they come together at things like AMO and other gatherings where all the municipalities get together and talk. And just because they're away at an approved conference doesn't mean they don't want to participate in a board meeting that's taking place. They have to have the ability to phone in from wherever that conference is and speak on behalf of the people that elected them to have a voice. The other issue is the very real issue that as we have an aging population, more and more people are responsible for taking care of an elderly member of their house, an infirm member of their house, someone who is ill, and they may not always be able to leave that person to physically go into a board meeting. Now, as I had stated earlier, under the Education Act, school board trustees have to physically be in attendance at least 3 times a year. That's not up for discussion. If you miss 3 times a year, the trustees can then move to have you removed from your duties as a trustee. I don't think you would find too many councillors, mayors, school board trustees who would miss more than three meetings, certainly not without consent. But there are circumstances where a member has, I had it when my children were little, when I was first elected, where my husband worked shift work, and he could not get the time off. His employer would not allow him the time off. So I had to stay home with my sick child, and I phoned in for the meeting. So I think that we have to be reasonable when we're talking about not allowing elected officials to call into meetings on rare occasions. That has to be allowed. We have had members in the past who have been hospitalized or sick themselves, who still, now there's dedication, imagine that, you're in a hospital, you're sick enough to be in hospital, and they're still phoning in to their meetings, to their council meetings, or in our case it was a board meeting. So I think that what you will find is in very rare cases will you have a municipally elected official who is going to abuse the privilege of being able to phone in for a meeting. I think that we have to look at it realistically and allow for professional judgment when it comes to phoning in. And I just wanted to bring up an issue too, because I'm almost out of time now. It's amazing how quickly 10 minutes can go. That member from Nickel Belt had raised around the Auditor General. So an Auditor General cannot look into the dealings of a City Council without the Council giving them the go-ahead to do so. And I'm going to talk about an issue specifically in Windsor, and in fact it's one of the councillors that's within my riding. His ward is within my riding. When he ran for election, when Mr. Borelli ran for election, the biggest part of his platform was saying that he would champion a municipal Auditor General. So our City Council would have their own Auditor General who would look into the business of council. And after he was elected, he backtracked on that and said that after a sober second thought, not implying that he was drinking when he was saying that, I just mean after he'd had a chance to go back and think about it, and maybe talk to some of the other councillors or perhaps the mayor, maybe they weren't in support of a municipal Auditor General, he changed his mind and he backtracked. And that has caused a huge issue in my riding, specifically around the fact that he ran on the promise to champion a municipal Auditor General and then back down on that. And in fact, he contacted myself and my colleagues from the area and suggested that somehow it was our responsibility that we should make the provincial Auditor General now completely responsible for the business of council looking into it. But in fact, the Auditor General cannot do that unless the council compels them to do so. So I think this is an issue that needs to be addressed municipality by municipality. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.